Hey everyone, this is Matt from Ionic. We're going to start in just one moment. All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the webinar Micro Front Ends for Mobile with Ionic Portals. My name is Matt Netko, and I am head of product marketing here at Ionic. And joining me is Josh Thomas, our product manager for Ionic Portals. Josh, if you're here, say hi.
Hello.
Hey. All right. We're really excited to be here today. We've got an action-packed agenda. We have a bunch of things to cover, starting with the evolution of app development that has led us from how we've been building for many years and leading us up to this newer micro front ends concept. And specifically, we're going to focus in on delivering micro front ends to mobile today using Ionic Portals, one of our new exciting products. And Josh here is going to give us a great live demo in just a few minutes. And of course, at any time, feel free to leave any questions you have for us. We're going to answer them at the end, but you can leave them at any time here in the sidebar. So let's get started. So first, I wanted to talk about the evolution of app development, just really briefly to kind of show how we led up to everything from monoliths to microservices and then micro front ends. So going back many years, perhaps the most popular way of building apps across any type of stack is the monolith. So that's a single tier application because we combined our UI, biz logic, and data access all in one single tier, one code base, and all of your development team is working in that same code base all at once. And that was a great way to build for many years until we started running into scaling issues, not just technology-wise, but also how teams work together and communicate and deliver software was becoming more challenging. So what kind of came out of that challenge was the microservice concept. And this is where you break up your application, that monolith, into a loosely coupled collection of services, right? And so this allows our teams to work on their individual slice of the pie and build, compile, ship, test, everything all on their own. And therefore, we're able to build and deploy a lot faster. Okay, so then that led us to micro front ends, which if we think about it, it's like microservices for the front end. So the idea here is much like breaking up the back end, we're breaking up our front end web app into individual pages, features, etc. And therefore, each feature is owned end to end by a single team or business unit. So again, you get those same benefits as building for microservices, but for your front end web app, which is, as we know in this space, increasingly becoming more complex to build and work with. And of course, ultimately, your end users see a cohesive experience. So it's still one single application that's delivered to them, but it's how we architect it under the scenes and behind the curtain and combine those features into that cohesive experience where it gets really interesting. All right. Okay. So the benefits of micro front ends. There are many. So as you can imagine, because we can work in parallel now, we're able to scale our development efforts, and much more so than in the past with especially a monolith type of functionality and way of building things. As a result, we can reuse assets, smaller pieces of functionality across all of our applications, which allows us to accelerate our development, both augmenting legacy applications as well as accelerating the ability to build new applications and experiences. Because you're saving all that time, you have the ability to tackle your growing app backlog and actually build more than ever before. So the challenge, though, is how can you do this on mobile? Because this is traditionally a desktop-centered focus with web applications. So, and especially because that mobile has some unique challenges, right? And there's a bunch of them here that especially are different than the desktop web experience. Well, first, out of the box, they don't work really well with native UI, mobile UI, APIs, and et cetera, because again, they're really, up until now, as we're going to see, The concepts are very different, and there's a lot of things that you have to do to get those two to play nicely together. Additionally, we have to remember that ultimately a mobile app has to be compiled and combined into a single app binary that the user downloads from the App Store. And of course, in our development process, this becomes a bottleneck as mobile teams and different feature teams within a mobile team have to combine their efforts and do integration testing and actually ultimately ship all that code together bundled up. And speaking in the App Store review process, that is a unique challenge because unlike the web, we have sort of like a gatekeeper thing going on with Apple, where you have multiple days potentially to get your new app updates out into the store, and that can slow down our velocity substantially. And finally, as we know these days with mobile versus web here, you end up with highly specialized teams for iOS and Android that you have to hire for and find that talent. And frankly, it's just simply easier. I think it's 10 or 100x more web developers these days that are available to hire and find that kind of talent. So that kind of stacks on top of each other, all these challenges. So one thing that we've seen at Ionic, working with different customers and enterprise ones, especially trying to build at scale, are this notion of feature modules on native mobile as a way to sort of replicate the micro front end technique, but with using native code bundles instead. And so as you can imagine, very similar conceptually, you're just building with iOS and Android type code. And what's nice is there is some benefit here because you have Google Play and the App Store that have come up with sort of their cloud services and their binaries that are used to and can handle this type of technique. The one I really love is Android App Bundles, which is the newer format for publishing your app. And what that allows you to do is ship that core functionality of application and then download individual bundles that add more features or functionality on demand. So your users don't have to download a gigantic app right up front. They can do that when you deem it's necessary as a developer. So as you can imagine, it's really popular with game developers because if we are starting up, your user starts at level 1 and doesn't need to access level 10 until they unlock that. And they may never get there. So why download that code until they're ready? So that's one example that has really helped those teams work with that. However, though, ultimately, despite those innovations that Apple and Google have provided for native mobile teams, they're ultimately still unable to build, test, and deploy independently in parallel. And really, there's a few things that kind of combine to drag us all down native mobile land. Again, ultimately, even if you're working in individual teams and put out feature modules, you do get some gains there. But remember, they ultimately have to compile down into the same binary. So this is more for when you're trying to integrate your new features and functionality to run automated tests and ultimately ship it to the App Store. You're still going to need every team's app code being bundled together, tested, and deployed. So as a result, while you can iterate and test in development locally, you're going to end up with longer build times because unlike web apps, you have to end up combining and building that single app binary. Furthermore, you have challenges. This can mostly come up with communication and some planning and architecture reviews that can tackle this, but you might have issues with managing your dependencies. Because if you think about it, we have common concerns like logging, analytics, data storage that might come up. And what happens if each team ends up using either different libraries, third-party SDKs to deliver those features? You could end up with a lot of bloat if you're not aligned and using both the same library as well as the same versions and keeping those on par with each other. And finally, again, all updates have to go through the App Store review process with native mobile. So you have that velocity slowdown. And these days, when we need to ship changes in this few matter of minutes or hours, especially if there's a critical app fix that needs to go out, it's no longer acceptable really for most companies and use cases to have multi-day waits to get those updates in your users' hands. So at Ionic, how do we tackle this? Well, we recommend as a way to get around all these mobile challenges to bring the web to mobile. And how do we do this? Well, with embedded web views, which are, if you're done any work in the mobile app development space, you know that it's a native web browser component. It's included and widely used in mobile app development because they're included in the standard iOS and Android SDKs from Apple and Google. And we use them to display internal and external web content. And what the benefit here is, and in this use case with micro front ends, is this unlocks the ability to reuse existing web content and apps within our native apps. So we're going to see how that's done. So why should we use web views to bring micro front ends to mobile? There's a bunch of great benefits that using the web gives us that tackles a lot of those challenges we just talked about with native mobile, traditional native mobile. The first one is, of course, it's easier to update without updating the larger app. You're no longer tied down to a single binary that goes into users' hands. It is what ends up what they have to download initially, but individually, your web teams can build, test, and deploy separately, as we're going to see with our demo here in a little bit, without touching the larger app, both the native side and other web micro front end experiences in there individually. So the next one is being able to scale your development. So with your in-house web talent. Now, every company today has a web team in some fashion because we have websites, right? We have internal web apps that we have to build and maintain. At the very least, not to mention web-based products probably. And more that's becoming very popular to have. So you already have this talent that you can leverage to scale your development efforts. You can safely bring in your web developers to help contribute to your native mobile apps. And again, because native or web talent these days is immense, and your web developers are used to building for multiple screen sizes, of course, including mobile. Because of responsive design and other modern techniques that have been around for at least a decade or so now. So these web views can be used to deliver mobile optimized experiences and effectively, and most importantly, be invisible to users. So you don't have to obviously have a web page embedded in a mobile app. You can make it look and feel truly native using web technologies, as we're going to show you, and not have to compromise on user experience or developer experience. And last, speaking of developer experience, you're not compromising anything using the web over native. We're really all about combining the best of both worlds. So you can access the complete array of native features like camera, Bluetooth, geolocation, haptics. Basically, everything's the sky's the limit in terms of what you can use and leverage in your web micro experiences. Let's take a quick look at some actual examples of companies using web views that I really like. You probably know these companies. First one is Apple Music. So they're really a best-in-class example of mixing native and web content together. So you see on the right here, we've got a native tab bar and song player controls. So we're using those native controls, which are really responsive. And you think about it, that makes sense because you probably have those song files downloaded and embedded on the device in the file system. So why not use those UI components to play those songs and hook into the operating system to do what it does best there, right? And so that makes sense for the native use case. But the rest of the screen, that browse experience where we're looking through different playlists, is all driven by the web. And if you think about that, with the way these work, where it's, today's hits could be key playlists that change on an individual user's basis, that content's really dynamic. So it makes sense to come from the web and be built in the web because we can do more custom tailored experiences and not have to ship all constant native updates all the time to get this content deployed to users. The next example is Netflix, a little company you've probably heard of as well. And what they're doing that I really like, this is a common use case, is serving their help pages, their FAQ, from help.netflix.com. So, of course, when Netflix rolled out streaming almost, 10 years ago probably or more, they already had a help section. They had their main website and web app, and they had all this content. You don't want to have to rewrite it or have your teams, your native teams rebuild it. So this is a perfect use case where it's entirely web-based content that is responsibly designed to scale nicely on a mobile device. And then most likely they have a customer success team or some team using a content management system to keep this info up to date and can add new pages and tweak the data at any time. And that doesn't require a native update because if you think about it, they're probably changing these pages every day or adding new FAQs. So what's great about that is you can entirely pull this from a web server and keep that up to date. But at the top there, they're still using native navigation. So for your end users, they can't tell that it's web-based. They don't have to care what the technology is. They just get a great user experience. So how does this work today? How are Apple and Netflix and other larger companies especially doing this? Well, they are pulling this off, but in some challenging ways. What they're doing effectively is building on top of stock web views. And there's some issues here though, because only low-level APIs are exposed by Apple and Google to do this. And you have some things that you have to recreate and build to make these experiences seamless. And that's things like communication between the web and native layer. So making sure that they can communicate and pass data back and forth. Handling navigation, errors, permission handling across web and native is challenging. And of course, how do you update those embedded web experiences dynamically? So you have to develop mechanisms and server-based options potentially to get those FAQs updated or other micro experiences updated. And so the reality of them all doing this themselves, because everyone recreates the wheel here, is that it's difficult to work with, using the stock web views. It's time consuming and costly to maintain. Even if you're a large enterprise like Apple or Netflix, it's not a great use of your time. You've got security risks and vulnerabilities that you have to keep on top of because, again, you only get low level access to these web views. And then, you lack native feature access from the web in a seamless way in terms of APIs and the way that you can expose these to your web developers. And in terms of granular controls, so making sure that your teams don't step on each other's toes while working in the side of the same mobile app is really a wild west at this point. However, we've got an option to solve this problem that we're really excited about. And when we want to think about how can you bring this idea of, again, micro front ends seamlessly in an easier way to develop them to your native mobile apps. Well, this is where Ionic Portals comes in, which provides embedded web experiences for your native mobile apps. This is a secure and extensible web view component that's backed by the Ionic team. So it allows you to bring in and embed your web experiences, as we're going to see in just a moment here, with full access to native, because again, there's no compromise in terms of user experience or developer experience. It's safe and secure because we stay on top of all of the security patches and updates and new operating system versions for iOS and Android. We do that for you, so you can just focus on building really cool apps. We also offer granular control and can put the native team at the wheel in terms of determining what can be updated within the app by the web team. And then we have live updates here, which I'll talk about in a second. And enterprise-grade support, which only the Ionic team offers in terms of real support from a company whose entire business is built around building enterprise mobile applications. And what I love about this, and ultimately what you're probably thinking about, is like your end users, right? Is their experience going to be good enough to make it look and feel like a native app? And I'm really happy to say that you can absolutely build this with Portals and our technology. You end up with a seamless integration between native and web so that your users really can't tell. It's invisible to them when their users are accessing any of these multiple front ends that are embedded in the native mobile app. So you don't have any jarring context switching or glitches or anything that'll stand out that'll make the app just not feel right in their hands. And again, you still have access to all native features, offline capabilities that are much easier to work with, and more. And a note on live updates, as I mentioned. So this is incredibly powerful. It allows you to push updates directly from the Ionic cloud without updating the native app, without going through an app store release process. So what's great about this is when you have a critical bug fix, you want to A/B test a new feature, or simply just move really quickly and ship something the same day, you can do this. You're not tied down by the App Store or Google Play review processes. And unique to Portals, you have the ability to choose to update only the micro front end you want to. So if you have 2, 5, whatever it is, embedded front ends, not all of them have to be updated at once. Individual web teams can control which ones are updated. And that's what Josh is going to show us here in a second. I'm very excited about this. And perhaps what the native team will love hearing is there's zero disruption to their work because you don't have to force any updates. You don't have to force any App Store reviews. The web teams that are working on the native apps alongside, in collaboration as partners with your native mobile developers, can do that without disrupting them on either side. So great. Now we're going to turn it over to Josh. Let's see, stop sharing my screen. All right.
Nice.
I can't see you just yet.
You can hear me okay, right?
Yep.
All right. Well, let me go ahead and share my screen so you don't have to see my OBS video there.
Yeah. All right, take it away.
All right. So at Ionic, we created a demo application to help organizations understand and adopt portals. And I'm going to walk through the scenario for its usage and how it allows teams to contribute and ship independently to a native mobile app. So here's our application at a high level. It's a native application that was built with Android using Java. And we created an e-commerce app that allows our customers to purchase swag from the Ionic store. Unfortunately, not a real store. So let's take a look at it. We have the screen listing all of the products. We can choose a product and dig in further. We can ask for help about this product. We can add it to our cart. We can check out. And we can also edit information about our profile. But as we started to integrate and build this application, we realized the checkout process, we could take advantage of the checkout and payment process that was already created by our web team. So we could avoid having to maintain the complexity of the checkout payment process in multiple platforms, be it iOS, web, and Android using web views and leveraging the existing web experience. But using a stock web view left a lot to be desired. And we wanted to share data and a great user experience flow. So let's take a look and see how we accomplish this using Ionic portals. So here's the application. Let's take a look at the native code. So here's the e-commerce app.java. This is the Java code that corresponds to this e-commerce application. So first we need to define the portal and point it to where the web code is stored. So here I've created a new portal for my portal manager, named it checkout, and said the directory that it was pointed at, which is web app. So as we look out at this checkout view, notice that it's a native view that's being displayed as a dialog. This means the view controller that corresponds and contains the web view is based portals. So let's take a look at the checkout dialog fragment. Here, you can see within this fragment, we're asking the portal manager for the checkout portal. We're passing some initial information to it. And then we're also subscribing to an event. And the subscription to this dismiss event then calls a dismiss method. So let's take a look at the checkout. And as I click cancel, that's actually forcing a dismiss event for it to go away. But one of the other things here that we can go back to this initial screen and see is that I'm actually adding plugins. So a plugin is a way to consolidate functionality that you want to expose through your portal to your web views. In this case, we're exposing the Shop API plugin. And this Shop API plugin is a custom plugin that we created for this application to allow for the transmission of information back and forth through the portals and the native app. So you can create additional plugins if you want, but for this application, we just created one. So the code that's in the Shop API plugin is exposed to each portal so that the web application can make calls back into the native code. And this plugin is built and maintained by the native developers. And they build plugins to allow the web developers to request the information that they need from the host native application through this well-defined API. So now that you've seen how portals are defined from a native developer's perspective, let's take a look and see how it works for the web team. So this application has multiple single page apps within it using Ionic components and React. But not that you need to use Ionic or React, but it does, in my opinion, make for a pretty great experience. And you can see the development for this is done using VS Code, and most likely the development is also done with a browser initially. And here is the checkout screen. This is the corresponding component in React. You can see we have the cancel button here at the top. We have the list of addresses that are being looped over. But in order for this information to be displayed within this component, we actually need to ask the native application for that information, be it the cart data so that we can get the total, the users so that we can get the addresses, and then also the checkout process. And this information comes from the data provider. So let's take a look at the data provider. Here you can see it's actually requesting information, get user, get data, get cart data. And if we look at these methods, get user detail, update user detail, they're actually just proxy to call into the shop API. And this is how we expose the information. This isn't actually calling into JavaScript code. This is calling into JavaScript code to proxy through to the native application. So if we look at the shop API plugin, this is just the corresponding TypeScript definition of the API that exposed through native. And you might recognize some of these names: get cart, get user details, update user details, checkout result, get user picture, set user picture. And that's because
hey, Josh, just really quick, buddy.
Yeah.
Can you zoom in a little bit?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. On the code.
Better?
Yeah, it looks better. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. All right. Sorry, continue.
No worries. So here we can see get cart, get user details, checkout result, get cart, get user details, checkout result. And we have the corresponding types for those. So this is how, from the web side, you can call back in through the portal using this plugin and access the native functionality that's been exposed by your native developers. So now that we've seen how all this code works together, let's talk through the actual checkout flow here and see exactly where the bounds are between native and web. So as I click the checkout button, I'm firing native code that's showing a dialog, which is really just the placeholder for the portal. Let's go back and change this data. This portal is gathering cart and user information from the native app because the native app typically holds that session information here. And as I click cancel, it's going back through the portal, back to the dialog to dismiss the view. And as I click checkout and place my order, it's placing the order and emptying out my cart. So this is what we mean when we talk about this seamless integration, where you can't really tell where the web code begins and where it ends. But one thing that I didn't talk about when I initially showed this application is we talked about the checkout portal, but we didn't talk about the other portals that are in this app. And there are a few more. The help page is a portal, and the profile screen is a portal. And these are two separate applications. So the help screen is one application, and the checkout and profile are a separate application with individual teams that are responsible for them. So yes, you can use portals for more than just checkout. But the ability to scale the number of teams that can contribute to applications like this is possible with portals as it sits today. So each team can contribute and keep their level of responsibility solely within the context of their own feature or page that they're responsible for, allowing teams to be agnostic in the web technology that they prefer. So if I were to do one with React and one with Android, that would not be a problem with portals. It's up to the individual teams and whatever they need to do to improve their velocity. Now, This solves some of the problem of why you would use a micro front end, but with live updates, we can not only delegate the responsibility to the individual web teams, we can also allow them to deploy on their own timelines. So let's take a look at AppFlow and see how these applications are set up. So here you can see within AppFlow, I have an application that is set up for our help screen. And I also have one that is set up for our profile and checkout screen. So these are two separate applications with different web teams that are responsible for them. So if we were to add these to our portals-based application, let's see what that would take to do within the code. We'll go back to this main e-commerce app.java file. Let's add some configuration for live update. And this comes with portals, so you don't need to add an additional package for it. And you see here, we're defining the IDs of those applications within AppFlow. So here's the ID for help. And here's the ID for the e-commerce profile checkout. So as we set those live updates, we then define the portals that those live updates apply to. So now, if I were to look at this help screen, we've applied the help config for the live update config.
Zoom in just a little bit there.
Yes.
If you can.
Let's see if I can.
On the code. Yeah, because I think it's great to underline like just how little code it takes to do that. Really exciting.
Sorry, having problems here. Let me change the size of my monitor view and maybe that'll help. A little bit maybe, but this code's available. So afterwards, if you want to take a look at the code and play with it, you can do so. So as like I said, set these live update configs, and now these applications can be maintained separately. And one of the things that I noticed as I was looking at this particular help screen in this application is that the text is wrong. I think I published a release that had the wrong color. So let me go back to the dashboard and look at my deployment destination for production. And there it is. I set the wrong color. So let's roll back that to what was previously there. And with this application, I'm asking for live updates. I believe it's every 6 hours or whenever the application is closed. So let's close this app and we'll reopen it. Let's go back to that help screen. That's better. Okay, so what just happened was by realizing that the previous change was correct, I was able to do a live rollback. And when I closed the application and restarted it, the application with live updates asked the service if there was anything new available. In this case, it asked specific to the help screen. And at that time, because the help screen is a separate application from the profile or checkout screen, we were able to deploy this fix without having any impact to these two screens. The code was only relevant to the help screen. And this is how we create this clear separation between responsibilities of the web teams and how we allow them to contribute to the native application using micro frontends. So I hope that this demo has given you an idea of the powers that Portals brings to existing native mobile applications and how you can leverage Portals to power micro frontends in these applications. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. And I'm gonna, before you stop sharing, or no, that's fine, we can just stop on it. I had a great question just to really clarify and double down on this. So Josh is showing off the app as a single developer, really, but as you to kind of clarify what someone asked, picture those the help page, the profile, the cart as potentially individual teams, right, Josh? That would own. There was a good. I really like how someone said that. Individual teams that would manage and own their own domain independently, right?
Absolutely.
That's really what it's all about.
In this case, I actually decided that there were 2 different domains, not 3. So the checkout page and the profile page, because you're able to edit your address within the checkout process as well as part of the profile screen, we actually share code there. So those are just different routes in the same application because the same team is responsible for those. But the help screen is part of CS, and they have a separate set of goals, and they maintain their own feature so they can deploy whenever they want.
Right. So you get a lot of code sharing options, but if you don't need that and you have your own slice and your own domain, that's perfectly viable and really
Absolutely.
the whole goal here. Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, thanks everyone. We got a ton of questions flooding in. I'm going to just do a recap. We're going to get to all of them. I just wanted to really highlight that point while we were top of mind. Okay. So again, we have that demo app up on our GitHub, so please go check that out, as well as our documentation is a great way to get started and really run through all that and so much more than Josh showed. So just a quick recap for Ionic Portals, and we're going to get to your Q&A again. We've got a lot of questions to get through, but we've got plenty of time to go through them, so we're going to definitely be able to answer everything. So ultimately, again, how this works in just a couple steps with using portals is you'll build your web-based mobile experiences, or you already have them most likely from your mobile web-based applications or sites, and you want to bring them into mobile, and that's ultimately what we're allowing you to do here. So this could be as maybe one feature from your e-commerce site as an example, like a checkout flow, or as Josh showed, it might be an entirely fully contained micro application or experience, like the entire shopping experience, not just the checkout flow. And so many more examples abound from that. And we take those micro front ends and embed them into your existing native app. That's what the magic behind portals. Yes, we're using the stock web views and then all of those great features that are built on top of it. That's what portals provide. So you don't have to do all that. Don't have to worry about all those challenges we talked about earlier. You get full access to native features, native navigation and controls. It's all really up to you. The whole screen could be web-based, or like we saw with like the Netflix and Apple or Josh examples, you can have native tabs, navigation, and other mechanisms and components to make them feel native even more so. So really, there's a lot of flexibility there. And finally, you can control access with granular permissions. So ultimately, what that means is your native team can decide which areas of the app that the web team can work on. Josh showed a lot of this in the code of defining what a portal is, or one of those micro front ends, what areas of one or one to many of those front ends where they live and how they interact with, and as well as decide on what data, features, and native type of device access that they're allowed to be accessed for security purposes. So that's everything. Let's get into our talk. You can get started building with portals for free. Check it out at ionic.io/portals. And I'm going to go to sidebar, so we're on screen here. Awesome. Okay, so we have a lot of questions. This is amazing. If something jogs your, gets the juices flowing as we're going through them, definitely add more. So I'm going to go back to like the beginning here. Oh, I love it. Let's start with, a good one. What about web view performance, Josh? That was the whole question, but if I'm going to guess, I think it has to do with, we get this a lot of like, if you're building web views or the web tech in general, how does that work performance-wise in a native app? Is it good enough? What's the real deal there?
Yeah, so we've actually worked with a few customers who went through trials with this and brought it to their particular stakeholders who were not fans of web views historically. Like a few years ago, one of our customers actually tried to do this on their own, and the stakeholders were not happy with it. In this last iteration with using portals and the way web tech has changed over the years, the stakeholders couldn't tell the difference. So they actually didn't tell them ahead of time. They just showed them the feature they were shipping, and the stakeholders couldn't tell. It's very difficult to see where the edges are, especially if you have a well-performing web team to build those applications.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that was a test where they were purposely looking for it too.
Yes.
And we're looking for the web versus native feel, and they couldn't tell, which makes it even more compelling, basically. Awesome.
Yeah, I can tell you that I don't think it's too much difference, that it's very difficult to see where the seams are. But having a customer tell you that they brought it to their stakeholders and went through that situation is just great news.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Bunch of questions about the recording. So yes, any of our live events, webinars that we do, we always have a recording available after. With the Bright Talk platform, you'll get an automated email afterwards with the recording. So look out for that, as well as the slides and a link to the sample app available to download. Absolutely. That will be in that email, and probably a link on the actual talk landing page. Those materials are always available. We make sure that you can access them later for sure. Let's see. Here's a specific code example or question, Josh.
Yes.
So was shop API plugin, that class name, actually a capacitor plugin?
That's exactly what it is. It is a capacitor plugin that is built into the native application. So if I were to want to separate that plugin out, and I feel like there was a case where we'd have shared functionality between iOS and Android, I could just create a capacitor plugin for it and share it between the two applications and have a single place where I could maintain it. But in this case, we built it as separate in each application.
Awesome. Okay, great question. Yeah, really good one. Why this direction versus PWAs, or progressive web apps? Is there a movement away from PWAs? I'll take that one to start, if it's good. So really great question. So we happen to be focusing on native mobile apps here, right? But I would say that there's the progressive web apps. I mean, Ionic, if you know anything about us, we're all about using the web technology to build great apps. And so really this isn't an entire directional shift for us. It's really about opening up web developers and native teams to work better together for, most likely, would you say, Josh, like your existing native mobile apps?
Absolutely.
So we recommend the hybrid or web native approach, which is separate, where you might start with Ionic capacitor to build mobile apps and ship them. But for the first time here, which is also why we're excited, we have an offering for the teams that, can't just start over for many reasons: time, money, constraints, and can't just tear down your existing native mobile apps in the stores and rebuild with Ionic. You don't have to, right? And in the past, we didn't have a good answer for that, frankly. And PWAs and the web tech, absolutely not. There's a time and place for those, and we still recommend that you build those. In fact, our main use case is building a PWA and then bringing it to iOS and Android, if you'd like. And this is just opening up, like, really a third, fourth, whatever the number is, option for teams that already have native mobile apps traditionally.
100%. In the calls that I've had with customers who have this question, I say, is this a greenfield application or is this a brownfield application? If it's a brand new app, why would you use portals? You could potentially just do this all in capacitor and use your web developers for that, if that's your goal. If you have an existing native application that's built with Java or Kotlin or Swift or Objective-C, and you're looking to augment that team and add additional functionality to your native application using those web developers, this is the option for you.
Got it. All right, lots coming in. I love it. We're going to have to stay on our toes here. Would each portal typically be shared by Android and iOS apps?
Yes. The portal, the web code in the portal itself, absolutely. That is definitely the target here. That abstraction for between the web and native works in the same way that capacitor does. So you could build that single web application and use it both in Android and in iOS. The plugins will be a little different, right? Because some plugins might be in only iOS, Swift, or only Java for Android, or you could have a shared plugin for both.
Yep. And I think that's another thing to point out is we do have Ionic framework, which is our UI library, component library of over 100 components that automatically do platform feature detection to see if they're running on iOS or Android, and automatically style them automatically based on what they're running on. So that's a good pair here, which would allow you to ship the same code to both platforms. That's kind of like
and there are helpers within in Portals and Capacitor itself to tell you which platform you're running in as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, because of course each platform's different. You're always going to run into little nuances or different branching paths you want to take, and that's absolutely feasible and done all the time. How can we combine micro frameworks using Ionic in both mobile and web PWA projects? So I think I'm seeing this a bunch where folks are asking about, Josh, do they have to just use React for this? Just use Stencil for, anything else, web components, whatever? Or can you combine them? How does that work with portals? Like, are they individual?
So every portal is a separate web application. One could be React, one could be Angular. It doesn't matter. I think that question might be more geared toward actual capacitor-based applications. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but there's potential for that with portals in the future. It's something we've talked about, creating a clear separation in that way, but it's not something that we have available at this moment in time.
I think if I saw it and asked a similar way. Maybe we have so many questions. I love it, but I think it's more about like, if I realistically just have different web teams or web devs that are comfortable with different frameworks, can they all still play together, work together?
Absolutely. That is,
yeah.
I mean, that's the primary focus of using a micro front end, right? Is that each team can choose their own tech. It doesn't matter. Each portal can be a completely separate web application, and the teams that are responsible for those can use different web tech. It doesn't matter. They can all be included in the same native application as individual application or web applications. Yes.
Yep. All right. Another one. Can we use GPS and camera from the mobile device using portals?
Yep.
Everything's on the table.
Yeah. That's right. We have a set of plugins that are available from portals out of the box, and all of those are our base capacitor core plugins. So in the example I actually showed the profile screen where I can take a picture, and that's through the portal going into native to use the native functionality. It's just the native teams have to decide to expose that to that particular portal. But all of that functionality is on the table and available to those web apps.
Yep. Okay. Can the same micro front end be embedded in different Ionic portals, one for Android and another for iOS?
For sure.
Yep. Absolutely. Very similar. Okay. Cool. I feel like I broke the Bright Talk question and answer because everyone's asking so many awesome questions. Sorry, this is just me being slow here, checking the box.
It's a great situation to be in.
Here's a juicy one. So, do we still need Android and iOS teams? Is there a way?
If you have an existing Android and iOS application, yes. Yes, you should use those teams to their full capabilities. This is not
about that's exactly right. It's not about replacing team members, web native or otherwise.
Correct.
It's about like combining the best of both worlds. If you have them, you don't need to go out and get a native team. That's what the rest of the Ionic stack is all about. Is if you have a talented web team, you can use them and don't necessarily need native mobile developers, right, Josh?
Now, there is a situation for organizations who are looking to use Ionic as more of their native application. And that's totally possible with the portals. You can segment part of the application initially and then move more and more over time if you want.
Yep, that's a great answer. You can, if you want to embrace more and more of the web, you can. If you want to, prototype it with one, that's what I love. Is it's not a whole, nowhere near an app rewrite by any means. It's about bringing in that smaller functionality. So if you wanted to POC it to your team or just try it out with customers, you're not going all in and having to rewrite the whole app or rewrite all the functionality. You can start as piecemeal as you want. Another good one. Does the portal backend, so the Android side, have to be written in Java only? Or do we support?
No, it can be done in
Kotlin, I
Kotlin.
suppose
It can totally be done in Kotlin.
Okay.
This example we have here is in Java, but we actually build our own libraries in Kotlin. So that is not a problem.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Answered that one. Any plans to bring portals to React Native and or Flutter?
So I will say that React Native is an absolute target. We are bringing portals to React Native this year.
Awesome. That's exciting.
Flutter is on the table, probably for a later date, but React Native is absolutely, portals is going to be coming to React Native this year.
Nice. Yep. And that's probably based, we just see so many React Native and React developers, in the ecosystem and who we work with. So
yeah, I mean, I think
makes sense.
I personally feel like it's a great solution for React Native. You probably, if you're using React Native, you probably have a lot of React web developers. So why not make use of them in order to contribute to that application?
Yep. So another good question, kind of the separation between Cordova or capacitor versus portals here. So does the portals require a hybrid framework like Cordova or capacitor to work? They already have a large Ionic app. What does portals provide that a combo of Ionic and AppFlow does not? So this is where, again, if you have, it's really a different way of building here, still with web technology. So if you already had a mission critical Ionic app, you'd keep using that. You'd use that path with capacitor, hopefully, and Ionic and our framework and AppFlow and all the other tools that are part of our awesome app platform. And you would continue that way. This is, again, mostly for existing native apps, traditional native apps that you would augment with web tech. Another question, if for the demo, if the web server is offline, does that mean the help screen is down in the app?
There is no web server.
Right.
So all of this code lives on the app.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're showing with live updates. And we think that's a really
it's embedded in there.
It's
right.
super important distinction. That web HTML, JavaScript, and CSS all lives on device. So as you build the application from the native perspective, that code is included so that as the user goes to that page, it's available immediately. You don't have to deal with network latency at all. It's immediately available from the file system. What happens is when you use live updates, it's actually pulling down the most recent assets from a service that we provide, and it stores those on device. So it'll make use of the new assets if they're available.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah, exactly. And
that offline is super important, and it's really important to have that. If you want that really clean user experience transitioning from native to web, I think that it needs to be on device.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm seeing a bunch of questions to kind of summarize this about offline or can't we just use iframes to like replicate this, things like that. And yeah, to your point with offline, there's by embedding the mini web apps, micro front ends, whatever you call them, in the app, it affords you so many more benefits, like accessing native device features, as well as avoiding some of the cores things, right? I believe like data access. And then same with like iframes. You have these cores issues and other sandboxed data access elements you can't do as smoothly. And especially from that user experience, it's going to look like an embedded box, right? Like just for the user perspective, it's not going to be as great. So it's so much more than just we're not
It's
we're
not.
not iframing it in by any
Yeah.
means, and that's you could, I suppose, right? But companies and other, we've seen that done. But honestly, to just take your, we've seen companies try that, and ultimately it's just not a great experience. Try to take their desktop website and embed it in mobile. It's just not, whether from a responsiveness and other unique challenges of building for mobile, you really can't do that and expect great results, right, Josh? Like,
I 100% agree.
yeah.
And it's a
So
lot that
similar
has to,
conceptually, but in the weeds, it's very, very different.
yeah. Users of mobile applications have a fairly high bar of what they expect of experience when they're using the application. And, plopping in an iframe to an outside desktop application is probably not going to be within their expectations. And it's definitely not going to create a great user experience.
Yep. All right. Lots more if you'll stick with me, Josh.
Oh yeah, I'm here all day.
Yeah, exactly. Is the web part, so the web app, aware of the portals? Can they communicate?
Yes.
Okay.
So the web app understands that they are in a portal because they're able to ask that information. And that's really powerful for development. So as you're developing your web application, you can do so without being within a portal, right? You can just do the development as though you're doing it within a browser and have the application understand that it's not in a portal at that point in time, which makes it really easy to potentially call out to an outside service to do to do a fetch to an HTTP endpoint, or to have mock data. But when you get plopped into a portal, it can start communicating directly to the plugin that's available to it to request that information from the native application.
All right.
We did that during our development process here.
Mm-hmm. How is authentication managed across portals? So this is a really important concept.
Yeah. So in that case, authentication, if you're using portals, has probably already been done by the native application. So
can you share cookies or other
tokens,
pieces of data?
Yeah, you totally can take that, the auth token from native and pass it down to those individual portals web applications. This is something that we get asked over and over again. And that is our expectation, right? The native application contains control and understands that it has been authorized. It passes that information down to the individual portals themselves. So the portals have access to the same auth token to be able to use that for subsequent service requests.
Awesome. Seeing a bunch of questions about whether or not portals can be used inside of a regular Ionic hybrid app or a capacitor app. How would that work or not work, Josh? What's your thoughts there?
Not today, but it is something that we are investigating. So if they truly have that need and it's specific to being able to empower multiple teams to contribute to an existing application, I want to talk to you. I want to talk to those teams and understand better their reasoning for it, because we've had a few conversations on this topic and it's starting to come up higher in my radar. So I want to hear more about those.
Yep. So to kind of recap, it's early days here. We're really excited about this, and to hear from all of you in our community and all the great companies we work with, what you need, as Josh said. So possibilities are open. You can just always get in touch with us. Oh my gosh, just so much good stuff. Lots of good stuff.
I can see you're trying to roll up the questions in your mind so you don't ask the same one over and over again.
There's a lot. No, it's okay. So because the mobile binaries are, packaged as like an APK or an IPA for iOS, how are updates done? Is the entire APK package being replaced?
No.
So that ties into our live updates and what Josh showed there, right?
Right. That is not replaced. That is the same IPA APK that's been deployed. It's just that individual portal is actually able to point to separate content.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's really the power of the web, because we can ship updates bypassing the app stores, totally allowed by their terms of service, by the way, for our web code. So
as
HTML,
long as you're not
CSS,
making
JavaScript.
changes, yes, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
As long as
Right.
you're not making changes to native code,
Yep.
the situations where you would need to do a new deployment would be specific to changes to your plugins or changes to the API that you use to communicate between native and web. Those would require new releases of the application because that's a native code change.
For portals that share common components, will these components be cached while switching between portals?
Well, the caching mechanism would be important if that information were being requested from a network interface. But because these common components can be shared on the file system, there is not a problem with needing to store them because the uptime is immediate. So since you're pulling from file system, it's not really, in my opinion, a concern.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another benefit of offline accessing features, as well as that one, to having the files on the device on disk.
Yep. And then if you're segmenting this with micro front ends, more than likely your applications are not huge monoliths, right? So the less code there is in the applications, the faster the startup time is.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And, because it's the web, you'd perform the normal build optimizations and minimization and all these other things that you are doing with modern web app frameworks or web components and whatnot, to make sure that they're as tiny as possible. So that would apply. Performance and doing all those steps applies to this in native mobile as well as the web. So all those skills, that's why it's not, with a lot of the tech we provide, it's not so much learning our proprietary platform. It's not. It's using your web skills and your talent that you already have to just do new cool things.
Yeah,
and build
absolutely.
really great, different experiences, extend your skills. I think it's great, honestly, for individuals on this call. As a web developer, it brings you more opportunities to skill up and do different, add to your repertoire.
Yeah, we expect web developers to be pretty excited about this. The ability to contribute to those existing native applications is probably something that a lot of people would be interested in.
Really good one about Xamarin devs. How easy is this for Xamarin developers, which is using C# and the .NET ecosystem from Microsoft, to write apps for Ionic? Do you have to learn React or other web frameworks, or is there a solution that you can translate it? So speaking myself as a former .NET, and still, I suppose, once a .NET developer, always a developer, who's written a lot of C#, I would say I would not necessarily start with portals per se, but look at the rest of our Ionic platform. And particularly for the C# or Xamarin ecosystem, I really like Angular. There's a lot of similar architectural concerns. So start by learning Angular and then bring in Ionic for some of the mobile components there, or the concepts.
Now, we have been asked one other time if portals would be possible within existing Xamarin applications. And I would just say that's another case where I want to talk to the teams who are looking to do that.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, this is that's a really good point, that not only has this opened us up to traditional native mobile apps, but perhaps these other hybrid or different frameworks as well, and whatever else comes up. And
it may not exist today, but that doesn't mean it won't exist tomorrow based on the demand of users.
Exactly. Yeah, we got a few more. How can integration testing be done in this case to avoid bugs on a micro front end case by case basis?
Yep.
So we should mention the E2E thing, perhaps.
Yeah. So I would expect you to do unit testing and the typical I don't know, whatever web testing framework you're using on these applications individually, right? You can do quite a bit of tests without having to go into native land. Whenever you're testing within native, you can use whatever tool you already have, Appium or whatever it may be, in order to ensure the data is being passed into those individual portals. That actually leads into another effort we have going on here at Ionic.
Yeah. Seeing a lot of questions again about portals, and I think this is a good, we will have to come up with a choose your adventure of the which part of the Ionic app platform is for you. So, because they're asking, can we use this feature without knowing the native platforms? So I believe with this, this is really, if you have a native dev team, you would go with portals and you have those existing native apps. Because as Josh showed, right, you are writing you're working in the native code projects, you're integrating portals because it is a native based solution, right?
Correct.
So that fits more with that. But our traditional, maybe we'll end up with a traditional Ionic stack or something. That originally and still is and will always be here, where focusing on more, building a web app and then deploying it to mobile. With Capacitor, our native runtime, that's a more modernized successor to Cordova. That actually creates actual iOS and Android projects that you as a web developer can get in there and make changes to, or if you end up needing custom native functionality, they're not Ionic proprietary based. They're just real iOS and Android projects. So you can make those changes, do anything you can as if you started off with a traditional project. So the sky's the limit there. Someone wants to talk to Josh too about portals. Martin, we will be in touch then. We have all these questions, and so we'll have the right folks reach out. We'd love to talk with you.
I love talking about it. I love getting on customer calls and talking about how this product can help teams and organizations ship faster.
And Rob wants to talk about Xamarin, so we love it. Definitely, we will. This gentleman will be in touch. How best to get in touch with you? So we definitely we don't have the poll thing set up. Let me see if I can. Josh, can you see the questions if you look at Bright Talk?
I believe.
Okay, I can't. Okay, never mind. I can't add a poll, unfortunately. So we will have someone, if you leave a comment here in the questions. I can't create a poll at the moment. It looks like it has to be beforehand, which is a bummer. But we could ask you for that. Normally, that's what we do. So leave as people have been doing, leave a comment in the little question box here, and we'll definitely get in touch. And most likely, if you have that intent, we would be in touch anyway. What is the unit testing framework for portals?
It depends on the unit testing framework for your typical web apps. I mean, it depends on what you're using. If you're using Jest, use Jest. If you're using Mocha, it doesn't matter.
Yep. So for your individual web-based experience, your portal, you use the tools, you test it, kind of separately with that. If you're thinking about integration testing, so really the mobile app, this is something we'll be talking about more this year and rolling out. But we are, and I think it's on our blog. I believe we're teasing that. Yeah. We are working on a new end-to-end testing solution for Ionic apps that should help with this. So testing the native mobile and the whole thing together. So I don't know specifically what our plans are with portals and that, but I believe that's something that could come up in terms of like testing the entire app together. Can stencil be used within the portal system? Could each portal simply render a web component? Josh, you're pretty familiar with stencil. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm pretty familiar.
You've heard of it.
So I would say that this isn't really targeted at building applications with stencil to where you're creating a native app that has lots of little components all the way around it, right? This is really about consolidating experiences for teams rather than like a design system. Now, if you're trying to create an experience that contains an entire page or a part of a page for a mobile application and you're wanting to use Stencil for that, have at it. That's absolutely possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, we love our web components around here, don't we?
We do.
Especially ones that leverage Stencil. This is a good one. I'm not sure I know what this is about. I see that Apple at the end of last year had an exception in their terms to add portals to their apps. Has this been resolved? I'm not quite sure. Do you know what they're talking about?
I am not sure, but I'd be interested in seeing that.
Yeah. If whoever wrote that, if you have a link handy, we'd love to see it. But the only thing I can think of is we do get a lot of questions of, can you about HTML5 apps? They've had some use that term before and allowing them in apps, and generally, folks, because this gets asked a lot. So, can you build a native app that's powered by web technology? Will Apple allow that? Is there a fear that your app will get pulled from the store? No.
I kind of doubt they're going to pull Amazon from the store.
No. And as I showed with Apple's own Apple Music and other ones, so many are using web views and web components and other things. We just touched on a handful of them. We're going to be putting out more materials with kind of unveiling other companies that are doing this. And then if you're building more traditional Ionic capacitor apps, also not a worry. The main thing that those guidelines, when you see them from Apple, are talking about are making sure that, again, you're not just trying to build a really, frankly, not so great mobile app out of your desktop website. Like, they just don't want it to feel like a poor user experience. And that's regardless of the tech you use, right? That they'll absolutely keep you out if, you can't create junk apps anymore. Haven't been for years. And so the best thing to do is to make sure that they look and feel like native apps. And that's where Ionic Framework comes in this example. So,
yeah, create a great user experience and don't do anything nefarious, and you won't have a problem.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Rob. So we've got an email to get in touch about that. We'll definitely do that because, we love digging in, nothing to shy away from, so we love it. Are deep links supported with portals? So could you deep link into an individual page of the app?
That is a great question. You should be able to. Yes, that is not something that I've tested, but I believe that is something you would be able to do. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because
and that might work just how the native app works, right? Like, you're effectively going to.
Right. But we have the ability to set an initial context whenever you view a portal, which can define an actual path within a single page app. So when that portal is displayed, it could go directly to that path.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a pretty good demo I'll need to create.
Yeah. Good idea. I'm a big fan of deep links myself. I mean, there's just so many use cases for
sure.
Shopping experiences, going to direct product details. I mean, really, it's endless. All right, we're getting close. Hope everyone's checking out portals if you had your question answered. Can portals work with web code using Vue.js and Quasar? That's the best thing about this is same with building Ionic apps is we work with any web technology. You'll see us frequently demo and quote, and customers work with Vue, React, Angular, the main three, but really anything works in terms of bundling it into a mobile app with Capacitor. And then with Quasar, so I believe, Josh, you really wouldn't use that per se with portals because that just gives you a lot of the native mobile stuff, right?
If you're using it specifically for the UI, you could totally do that, right?
Okay.
And augment it with Capacitor. That's a great question. I don't necessarily know Quasar that well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same. Oh, this is a good one. Can I ship my native SDK with portals? My team built a cookie banner with web tech. Ooh, stencil. Shout out. Bravo. And we'd love to use portals to make our own native SDK for embedding that in our client's native app. Is that possible? So I
Yes.
believe that's just the native. You would ship that as a native library or SDK as you normally would. And then again, because the web and native layers can communicate with portals, whatever you want to do with it in terms of data passing or calling out to that native SDK from the web, you can do that, right, Josh?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Yep.
Primary use case.
Mm-hmm.
And to get back to Quasar, for Vue, yes, that is possible. Quasar would definitely work in this situation.
Sweet. Let's see. Yeah, really good session. Q&A has been excellent. Thank you so much. We really love hanging on with all of you, and really appreciate your questions and keeping us honest with, everything. Oh, great. So we have someone that wants to talk to us. Hey, we'll be in touch for sure. Stay tuned. We've got, a lot of requests, Josh, coming in. You're going to be a very busy guy. You're not going to be able to.
I prefer that.
Love it.
I'm a product manager. I love being on calls with customers.
Mm-hmm. That is true. A happy Josh is a customer call away after he's had that. How about third-party analytics handling platforms differently for both native app and web apps? Are they unified? So that might be a tricky one. What do you think?
Yeah, it depends on it depends on the analytics. You could totally, though, like if you have native analytics and you're wanting to use the same analytics within your web, you can totally create events to handle that within a custom plugin. That is not a problem. That should be fairly easy to do. Mm-hmm. But if you have separate analytics, one for web and one for native, that's actually possible as well too.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. How are newly developed portals shipped to the end user? So let's say you had one already and then you open up another portal. I love that, by the way. We need more like we need a collab with Steam. Can you touch base on that? Same thing if you delete or remove an already published portal. What's that like developer experience and end user experience?
Yeah. So if you are adding a new portal or deleting an existing portal, you'll need to deploy a new version of the native application because those require changes to the native code. Other than that, it's just like pushing out a new update. It's the user experience is just the new feature appears or the feature goes away. It's really up to the native team to decide how to add that feature to the existing native app.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I imagine a situation where you're just, connecting with them, communicating, being like, "Hey, we were experimenting with this particular portal. It's time to sunset that, or maybe repurpose it. Here's the plan," and then get that update in the app stores. Like
one thing we haven't really touched on that's possible though is A/B tests with this.
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly. Yeah, and I envision where I'm sure we're going to see this where teams, you probably just keep that same setup because then again, you don't have to ship a native update, but just repurpose what that portal does. Ooh, that could be really fun. Yeah. Again, lots of we're only ourselves in the early days of this, which is why it's so exciting because it's not until we open it up to you, the world, that we see what's possible and the really cool use cases you all come up with. So we got another person that wants to get in touch. Put them on the board. No lunch for you, Josh, for a while.
That's all right. I can eat at my desk.
On the phones. I love it. Yes, person that just posted that, we will definitely be in touch. Can an existing web client be broken down into separate portals? We'd prefer to have a native app, but just use certain pieces as a little front end or portal itself.
Yeah. So if you have an existing single page app, or if you're building a single page app and you want to use it for multiple portals, That's totally possible. I actually showed that within the demo.
Mm-hmm.
There were two separate portals. The difference is that you can set the initial context to be the route that you would like the portal to begin at. So that's
Yep.
absolutely possible.
Yeah. So what I love about that is if you had, yes, you could take some effort if maybe performance or just really keeping it trim or slimmed down. You could break that into, pull that into two separate apps and then embed them, or
Yep.
web components if you really want to go another level down, excuse me. But, or if Josh said, if you want to get something out quickly, just set the path and it'll automatically navigate to
Yeah.
that.
And
Whether it's like profile, FAQs, account, cart. That's really what you're doing. It was all the same React web app, right?
I would say you adapt portals to your organization and your organizational needs. If you have one team that's responsible for what you would expect two different portals, then build it as a single page app and separate it by routes. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if you have different applications and different teams responsible, then separate it by code completely and have two different portals with two different applications.
Yeah. See, and I love that too, because, remember building with the web these days, how everything with routes and pages and everything are typically, what's the term? Lazily loaded. So you don't yes, if you keep it in the same app, and that's what I love about when I'm working a lot with Angular and React these days, and either one, none of that code really, only the route that you're navigating to has to load. So you just get so much speed and performance benefits from that, because you're not loading the entire, let's say 50 page app, whatever it is, all up front. That's what I love about SPA's single page apps. And I think that same speed benefit will help with portals here too. Can portals be lazily loaded? Or is it all I'm guessing they mean are all of them loaded on app startup, native app startup?
No, they are started on per use. So you leave a portal, it goes away. You come to a portal, it opens.
Mm-hmm.
But what we've seen from performance perspective is that there isn't a problem with that.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. What would be the performance implications? What would the performance implications be if you had multiple portals on a page? Excuse me, I need more water. With different versions of React. So that's a good one.
If you want to use different versions of React, that's fine. But we don't want to put 50 portals on a single page, right? Because you'll run into memory issues with that. So you really should only keep 3 to 4 portals active at one point in time. But that really speaks to how you should be building your micro front ends, right? Is where you're building a front end that has a very specific responsibility. And within a mobile application and a mobile first perspective, you're kind of separating those into multiple pages for those experiences.
Yep.
But if that's a really big concern, let's talk about it and understand what you're trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, our portals documentation goes into a lot of detail, and we're going to keep expanding that on just these types of architectural and how you set this up type of questions to be successful, right, Josh? And I know we've got a lot of that in there already. It's a good read, good lunchtime read. Can we achieve this concept of portals using a Cordova plugin? Are we planning to shut down the Cordova support? And that's probably, I'll talk about that part, but first part, Josh.
Yeah, so not with a Cordova plugin. It needs to be a capacitor plugin. But transitioning your Cordova plugin to capacitor probably shouldn't take a exorbitant amount of time. It shouldn't take too long.
And most likely, if you have an app that's using Cordova today, you're probably on the other side of this, where it's a web first app and you're using Cordova to build for iOS and Android. Probably we'd recommend, right, Josh, migrating to capacitor, which is 99% backward compatible with Cordova in the first place, and a really easy path for getting a more modern developer experience and honestly, a lot of different performance benefits, other things like that. Yep. And then in terms of, Cordova support from the Ionic organization, our company and everything, a little outside of this, but just briefly, we still support Cordova, and we do. And in terms of, advice there, our newer native runtime solution as like we act as like a successor to Cordova is called Capacitor, capacitorjs.com. And we really recommend migrating that over because more and more, honestly, what our plans look as a company and supporting the businesses, everyone from hobbies on up to large enterprise, is focusing on capacitor support for new services like this or for the live updates portion of this, right? So, we have lots of options. We have migration service advisory available if you need that in your company. We've got amazing docs that really you can do that all on your own, potentially in an afternoon or two. It depends on the size of your app and all different factors. But ultimately, I would recommend, if you are still haven't yet, taking a look at migrating off of Cordova. As a reminder, Ionic does not own Cordova. It's a open source Apache project with a separate team of volunteers and maintainers. We just happened to originally use them to build for iOS and Android, and now we increasingly are focused on our own tool that's built in-house, Capacitor, also open source. So someone's really excited about the potential for React Native support in portals. Is there a timeline for that, Josh?
I can't give a timeline, unfortunately. I can tell you that it is a priority of mine, though.
Awesome. Cool. Yep. And as always, that's where getting in touch through us, any mechanism through here or otherwise, is a great way to be. Join our email list. We let you know as soon as possible.
I would say if you're that interested right now, reach out, and whenever we get an alpha version available, we want feedback. Mm-hmm. So post a question here. If you're looking for React Native support, let us know, and we will get in touch with you when we have an alpha available for you to provide us feedback on.
Mm-hmm. Great. I think we have time. We're kind of running out of time. We got a couple more we can answer. And again, we'll be in touch. Can we see how a component would adapt to each platform? For instance, a dropdown made for web, but then showed in iOS or Android, where a normal dropdown is normally used. So lots to explain there. Again, Ionic Framework is our tool and UI library that does that for you. We build all of the animations and gestures for iOS and Android that you don't have to, or like in my case, I would not be able to skill-wise. And that's awesome because honestly, it allows you to build your unique portions, your business logic, your functionality that's unique to your app. So instead of reinventing the wheel or having to worry about those cross-platform delineations, you don't have to. So that's more of Ionic Framework.
Yeah, and if you're really interested in that, just Google Ion Select, and it'll more than likely take you to a page that already has this built in, so you can see it real quick and play with it.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I think that's everything for today. On behalf of Ionic, again, I'm Matt Netko, and this is Josh. Thank you so much, Josh. We really love talking with you all, and we'll have lots more presentations about this, lots more materials about Ionic portals. We are kicking off a new year here and really jazzed about this and everything else coming. So thank you so much. Until next time. Cheers.
Thanks.